So welcome to the Geospatial Forum. Our speaker today is James Amato, who is originally from Wisconsin. James has 2 degrees, a BS and an MS from the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee, with emphasis on 3 areas: geophysics, geomorphology, and sedimentology. In 2017, James joined the Department of Geology at the University of Wisconsin in Oshkosh, where he worked as an instrumentation specialist, co-teaching a geology field camp and other field courses. In 2020, James moved to Wyoming to work for the Wyoming State Geological Survey as map editor and geospatial technical principal. He was that agent's subject matter expert on GIS and other geospatial technologies. Since 2023, James has been working as a research professional within the 3DV Center in the School of Energy Resources. He is an FAA licensed drone pilot and oversees the school's GIS and remote sensing programs. At the same time, James is wrapping up a second MS degree in GIS&T here at YGISC and has plans to pursue a PhD in the Department of Geology and Geophysics. Please join me in welcoming James to the podium.
Thank you, Paddington, for the introduction. Thank you, YGISC, for the opportunity to speak today. My name is James Amato. Work over at the Biz Center, at the School of Energy Resources. I started there about a year ago, and shortly after starting, we decided to stand up a UAS remote sensing program. So this talk kind of summarizes a lot of the work that's gone into the program so far. We've accomplished a lot of things, but there's still a lot of work to do. All right, so these are some of the topics that we're going to cover today. I wasn't sure if we're going to get a mix of people, students, or people that have experiences with drones or no experience in drones or interest in drones. So it's kind of an overall presentation. So we'll discuss certification. Certification is important if you're going to fly commercially. You need to get certified by the Federal Aviation Administration. One of the first things, if you're looking to stand up a program or looking to purchase a drone or get into flying, you really want to understand the applications, what you're trying to accomplish, right? If I buy a drone, what am I going to use it for, right? You really want to look at compliance. This is a touchy subject right now, right? There's global leader in drone technologies, a Chinese-based company called DJI. There's a lot of kickback and concerns from the US over national security using these drones, right? So there's been a big push to use American drones that are NDAA compliant. Once you have an idea of your applications and compliance, you can start looking at payloads. Those payloads are used to do whatever you want for your applications. Payloads are basically sensors or cameras or instrumentation that attach to the underside of the drone. And then from there, once you realize what kind of payloads you have, then you can look at the actual platform or the drone, right? There's all different sizes of drones. There's small, medium, large, extra large, right? If you have a big payload, you need a big drone to carry it, right? So understanding what type of payload you need will dictate what size drone that you need to purchase. We'll also look at some software options. We'll discuss insurance, which is often overlooked until the very end. And when you're dealing with high-priced drones and high-priced payloads, it's something to consider early in the game. And then one of the primary applications we purchased this drone for is we're going to acquire a hyperspectral sensor, use that for mineral exploration. So we'll get a little bit into detail about hyperspectral at the end of the talk. So again, one of the first things, you need to have a pilot that's certified to fly commercially, right? There's no point in standing up a program or purchasing a drone if you're going to fly commercially, right? And so the FAA Part 107 is basically rules and regulations and safety regarding flying drones. It has nothing to do with actually flying the drone. It's all about the rules and regulations. So to get certified, you have to pass a knowledge exam. This knowledge exam can be taken at a test center in Fort Collins or Casper. It's usually composed of about 60 questions. You get about 2 hours to complete it. you need to get a 70% or better. And so the beautiful thing, what we have here at YGIS, right, there's a couple 1-credit courses you can take to prepare yourself for this exam. Chris Leatherman teaches a 1-credit safety and regulations course. He also teaches a mission planning course. And if you take that course, it prepares you to take this exam. I took the courses. Chris uses a lot of test questions from the actual exam on his quizzes. And so basically after I took his class, I took all those quiz questions. I created 300 quizzes or questions at a bank and basically studied for a good month. And with that knowledge, I was able to pass the exam with a 90%. It's a good thing to have. If you're going to fly recreationally, if you're not going to do anything commercially, it's not required. The exam goes over, again, everything from safeties and regulations, right? The sky is only going to get more and more crowded with drones. So it's important that, people that are flying unmanned and manned aircraft are in the same loop with things. So there's a lot of things on safety and regulations. You're only allowed to fly your drone 400 feet off the air. You need to keep it in a visual line of sight, right? There's lots of things that you need to know. Operations, emergency procedures, things go wrong in the middle of a flight. How are you going to handle it? You need to be prepared, right? National airspace, this is a really important topic, right? You become a master at reading sectional charts, right? Sectional charts are basically really detailed maps that explain all the controlled airspace across the US, right? You need to be able to go outside and go, okay, I'm going to go fly over here. Am I in controlled airspace or uncontrolled airspace? A big component of the exam is understanding national airspace. And then there's also things like weather and loading and performance. So one of the first things we did is we wanted to figure out, we want to launch a drone program. What are we going to use it for? And one of the things is we had some ideas what we wanted to do in the Viz Center, but we also wanted to use this drone across other centers at SCR, Center of Economic Geology and Research, hydrogen, and so on. So we basically set up a big staff meeting about a month before this. I dived in deep, met with different platform companies, different payload companies, trying to get ideas of prices, trying to get ideas of capabilities so that I had a general knowledge of walking into this whole staff meeting so that we could discuss possible applications, right? And so the things that we really stood out, we wanted to do photogrammetry, we wanted to create beautiful high resolution orthomosaic images. We wanted to do cinematography, capture sexy videos that we can use, right? Promote on social media. We definitely wanted to get into terrain modeling, 3D modeling. And then there were some things that like Hager was really interested in, the Center for Economic Geology and Research, one being mineral exploration and one also being air monitoring. There's a big push right now for critical minerals in the state, and hyperspectral offers the opportunity to really take this type of exploration to the next level. Also air monitoring, we were curious to see if we could find a sensor where we could monitor greenhouse gases, methane emissions, right? A lot of the work that we do. Those were our applications. Once we knew that, we could start looking at the different payloads. We considered an RGB camera. We considered a LiDAR sensor, hyperspectral, and we really also looked at a variety of different gas detection sniffers. And through this meeting, and again, I guess you can also link, right? So some payloads can do a lot of things and other payloads are somewhat limited, right? And so we really kind of considered everything on the table. We started looking at financials, how much these things cost, what do we want to do to start this program off. And so ultimately we decided to get a really nice high resolution RGB camera and invest into this hyperspectral payload, which we'll get into in a little bit. I'll also touch upon later on how this kind of works in the realm of air monitoring. Compliance, right? This is huge right now. To give you a little bit of a background, again, the global leader in drone technologies is a Chinese-based company called DJI. They were founded in 2006. They started selling their drones in North America in 2013. Their drones are extremely intelligent and very affordable. They're great drones. I think most people that fly drones, people like DJI products. They got their stuff together, right? They know what they're doing. But again, in recent years, these Chinese drones have drawn concerns over national security. The federal government doesn't like it. The federal government thinks that China's using these drones to spy on us. So in 2020, the Department of Defense was restricted from purchasing DJI drones, as well as other drone platforms coming out of China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran as a result of this National Defense Authorization Act. Some states started following suit and started banning DJI drones from both state and local governments. This caused huge inconveniences to many local law enforcement and emergency services that had invested large sums into these platforms. Currently, Wyoming state agencies are restricted from purchasing Chinese drones. University of Wyoming doesn't have any restrictions in place. School of Computing gave a symposium a couple of weeks ago. It was interesting to hear that, a lot of the county sheriff's departments were using these DJI drones, but that the YDOT people had to use these NDAA compliant drones, right? So it's a little all over the board right now in Wyoming. But I will say that there is a bill moving through Congress right now as we speak, and it's gaining traction. There's a lot of people that want to ban DJI drones in the United States. And there's a bill that was passed by the House, and it's moving towards the Senate right now. And that basically would put DJI on a ban list to use telecommunication infrastructure across the United States for their drones to operate on to broadcast remote ID. So some people say this is national security. Some people might argue that this is corporate America too, right? So it'll be interesting to see how things pan out, but it's one of these things that if you're going to invest in a large drone, you really need to consider, can I buy Chinese or do I need to be NDAA compliant, which we'll get into. So because of this, because of purchasing drones from foreign adversaries, the federal government initiated NDAA compliance. And NDAA compliance restricts a drone, key components from that drone, to being manufactured in these countries such as China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, right? This includes everything, all components of the drones, radio devices, transmission devices, flight controllers. They get really even specific with resistors and all components that make up these things. So for a drone to become NDAA compliant, it's not on the end user, it's on the manufacturer to go through this process to get their drones certified. You might have also heard of Blue UAS. Blue UAS is NDAA compliant drones that undergo further rigorous cybersecurity assessments. These drones are typically offline, which actually kind of creates a gray area because to fly a drone in North America or in the United States, it needs to be online and broadcast a remote ID, right? Most people in this room will never need a blue drone, right? Unless you're working with like the military. NDAA compliant drones, you might have to work with depending upon if you're working with a federal or a state entity. School of Energy Resources, we work very closely with the Department of Energy. We work very closely with the national laboratories. And it was in our best interest to align our UAS efforts with the restrictions on place with those entities. We met with Los Alamos, they're doing drones, they're doing hyperspectral, no Chinese drones, right? So it pushed us to make a decision and go with an NDAA compliant drone. There's also a thing called Green UAS. Green UAS is similar to Blue UAS, but the certification comes from an international drone association. It's not a stamp of approval from the government. So do I need to be NDAA compliant? Some simple questions to help this, right? If you're flying personally, if you're getting a drone, you're going out to the snowy range to fly it, you probably don't need an NDAA compliant drone. If you're starting a real estate business, you're going to go fly a drone around a house to capture some data, right? You probably don't need to be NDAA compliant. But if you're working with a federal or a state entity, it's best to check and see, because you might need to be NDAA compliant, right? Chinese drones are, I don't want to call them cheap, they're very affordable. NDAA compliant drones are definitely more expensive, right? There's definitely a significant price increase in purchasing a drone that is NDAA compliant or Blue UAS. So next we'll talk about payloads. And so again, it's important to understand if you can buy a Chinese drone or not buy a Chinese drone. If you can buy a Chinese drone, this might direct your direction with payloads because DJI makes wonderful payloads that only work exclusively to their drones, right? If you can't buy a Chinese drone, well, then you're going to get in the world of all these other sensors, right? That even cost more money, right? And when you're looking at payloads, man, I'll tell you, shopping for payloads and drones, it's like used car salesmen. It's like they will promise you everything. They will say that this drone is the best. It's going to stay in the air for 50 minutes, you're not have any issues, payloads. I mean, they promise you the world. It's a complete like wine and dine situation, right? And you got to navigate a lot of this. You got to ask a lot of questions, right? You got to get into details about software even, right? Because a lot of them will sell the product, the payload, and then, oh, there's this annual software maintenance agreement of $3,000 a month, right? Or not a month, but a year, right? There's all these hidden costs that you need to be aware of, right? And the other thing is like some of these LiDAR payloads, Regal is one of the biggest LiDAR payload manufacturers, and a lot of these other LiDAR manufacturers actually use the Regal laser in their sensors, right? So it's almost the same product, you're just paying for like variations in customer service and flavors of software, right? So you really got to shop around and ask a lot of questions when it comes to this. And I'll also say it's near impossible to find a payload that's going to be NDAA compliant. The whole compliance thing is a platform thing. The payload manufacturers are like, we're not going to deal with this, right? You kind of still want to be smart about it. I wouldn't buy a payload from China, but you know, I'd buy a Sony camera from Japan, right? I might buy a hyperspectral sensor from Norway or the United States, right? They're not going to promise you that there's not a Chinese resistor in one of their instruments, right? So it creates another gray area of trying to be compliant and appease the federal government. So yeah, these are the payloads. We've acquired our high resolution RGB camera. It's a Sony camera, it's a 61 megapixel camera. We wanted something that we could fly very high and something fast, right? The higher you can fly, the more area you can cover. The faster the drone the more area you can cover. It's all about battery life, right? So right now we can fly this drone at about 350 feet above the ground at about 15 miles per hour and create beautiful orthomosaics that have centimeter scale accuracy. It's beautiful, beautiful photogrammetry. The camera, the gimbal, and the lens cost approximately in the ballpark of around $10,000. Hyperspectral, right? So this is relatively new to put hyperspectral cameras on drones. It's just now that the technology's become light enough where we can put them on as a payload. In the past, usually hyperspectral has only been found on satellites and manned aircraft, right? And also in the early stages of hyperspectrals in drones, hyperspectral, there's different wavelength regions, right? And so really if you were studying something that was diagnostic of the visual near infrared region, you would just purchase a sensor that focuses on that region. And now the technology's expanded and you can get these co-aligned systems, right? That create a larger spectral range. So these actually go across the veneer to the shortwave infrared region, right? So it's a large region of the hyperspectral that's being put on these sensors. You're also getting them equipped with a little LiDAR part, right? So that you can georeference and make sure that the hyperspectral is spatial. These are really the two top of the line hyperspectral sensors on the market right now for drones. One is HiSpecs from Norway. The other one is Headwall. They're from Massachusetts. You can see there's some variations with the number of bands and the spectral bandwidth in the different wavelength regions. You can also see there's a significant difference in weight, right? The Headwall sensor is lighter, which means we could fly it longer in the air. People have said though that while it's a little bit lighter, it might be a little weaker on the optics, where the high spec sensor has a little bit stronger optics, but it's also a little heavier, right? So we're actually literally in the middle of procuring this. We'll hopefully have an answer soon in the coming weeks, which direction we go. Once you know what payload you need, then you can start looking at your drones, right? You got a big payload, you need a big drone, right? These payloads that we were looking at, hyperspectral, are around 17 pounds, right, for the high specs. So we need something that's capable of carrying something like this. And so when we were looking at drones, we kind of looked at 5 categories of things. We wanted to buy from a credible source. There's a lot of mom and pop companies right now opening up drones that are working out of their garages, right? We want to buy a drone from a company that is established, and if something breaks in a year or two, they're going to still be around to help us fix it, right? We're just not willing to take the risk of working with very new startup companies right now. Compatibility, we had to make sure that the payload would actually work with this drone. We needed a drone that was compliant. And then we started looking at flight times, and then we started looking at redundancy, right? So if we could have flown Chinese drones, we probably would have bought in the DJI Matrice 600. USGS has a fleet of these. They have like 16 of them. And now the federal government says you can't use them, so they're all going in the dumpster, right? And they're investing in now NDA compliant and Blue UAS drones. It's a great drone, just can't use it, right? Free-fly systems, Alta X. If you thought that drone was big, the Alta X is even actually bigger than that drone. The Alta X can go above, there's another rule from the FAA. You got to keep your drone under the total weight of 55 pounds. If you go over 55 pounds, you really have to jump through a lot of hoops and get a lot of waivers and authorizations to be able to do it. So the whole goal is to keep the drone under that 55-pound threshold. The Alta X can go, I think, like up to 75 pounds off the ground. It's a bigger drone, and because it's a bigger drone, they had to use literal batteries and to keep everything under that 55-pound threshold. Our biggest complaint with the Alta X is with the hyperspectral sensor on it, we were only going to see about a flight time of like 10 minutes, right? So we were introduced into Harris. Harris is reputable. They make military drones, right? These drones are being used in wars right now. The sensors are compatible with them. They're NDAA compliant. We estimate a flight time that's twice as much as the Alta X. So we're expecting a flight time with about 20 minutes with our hyperspectral sensor. It's all a little unknown because we're also at high elevation, which has an effect on battery life. And it's also very windy in Wyoming, which has an effect on battery life. So we're looking for that 20-minute. And then redundancy. Alta X is a 4-rotor, right? It's got 4 rotors. If one rotor breaks, the drone comes down and crashes, right? And when you have a sensor worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's a concern. So the Harris Aerial is an octocopter, and basically it's designed that if 2 motors go out, the drone will keep running. Now, you don't want to fly it, you want to land it, but the idea is you'll be able to land it safely and save your payload from crashing. And then I guess the last thing that was a big seller for us is we talked to payload companies that flew these drones, and everybody was like, free fly. Free Fly designs their drones around cinematography. So they're very fast moving drones to get those action shots in the sky, right? Harris is built for instruments. And so everybody was like, you want to fly a Ferrari in the sky or you want to fly a Cadillac in the sky? And when I've got a payload that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, I want to fly a Cadillac in the sky, right? So that also helped push us towards the Harris drone. The drone itself was about $35,000. Batteries are about $2,000 a piece. We were able to fly for a total of a little over 2 hours. So we purchased about $8,000 in batteries. We got an upgraded controller. All said and done with the upgrades, extra batteries, extra propellers, travel case, and all that stuff. It's about a $60,000 investment. And then the RGB camera is about a $10,000 investment. So yeah. We name our drones after Godzillas. So this is the 3-headed Godzilla, Ghidorah. Again, we went through some of this information already. We're averaging flight times with the RGB. We put up in the sky, we get about 30 to 35 minutes flight time at elevations of 8,000 in semi-windy environments. It's basically made of carbon fiber. These are the batteries. There's 2 of them that go on the drone. They are by far the heaviest thing on that drone. Later on, if you want to pick it up and get a feel for it, you're more than welcome to. This is primarily used for photogrammetry, create high-resolution orthomosaics, and will be used for the hyperspectral. We also bought a Chinese drone. We bought, this is Mothra. It's a DJI Mavic 3 Pro Cine. We use this for cinematography. We use this to put up and capture 360-degree photos, right? So we can put them in headsets and we can put them on web applications. And then we also use this just to get some flight time to go out and practice, right? Because the more flight time you have, the more you appease the insurance gods and the lower your premiums are, right? So it's a great, for Chinese drones, we love this drone. It's a great drone. It's the Cine series. So it's got really good optics. It's got 3 cameras on it. It's got 1 terabyte internal storage on it. It's a lovely drone. Our only complaint is that in the past, DJI had all their drones that were SDK capable. And what SDK capable means is that third-party companies could develop software that could be put on the drone and then used, right? So maybe there was really good mission planning ground control software, right? And what DJI did with the Mavic 3 series is says, we're going to do enterprise drones, we're going to do general consumer drones. And if you want to have these SDK capabilities, you need to buy an enterprise platform. And if you don't, then you just buy a general consumer drone. And we just thought the optics on this were too good, and we had the big drone to kind of do the actual autonomous mapping. I'm not going to talk about base stations too much, but sometimes you want really accurate flying or you want really accurate data, right? And so this is a GNS receiver. It connects to the drone, it talks to the drone, it gets real-time GPS. And so in some applications, you might want precise flying. Maybe I'm inspecting a bridge, transmission wires, a dam, right? I need that drone to fly with precision, right? And that there's no drift. Other times, I don't care about flying precisely. In Wyoming, it's open and wide and we're just flying, but I want really precise data, right? We're capturing an open surface pit and creating a terrain model that we're going to put in virtual reality, right? We want centimeter scale accuracy, and that's when we would use a base station. DJI makes a good one. They're only for DJI drones. There's a really good company out there called Emlid. The problem with Emlid, it's affordable, it's great, but they're from Russia, right? And they moved to Hungary, right? And it's a gray area of using Emlid receivers. Trimble makes great receivers, but they're like $15,000, way more than you actually need for a drone. We ended up going to Harris Aerial, explaining our situation, and we put together a makeshift base station, kind of using different components that were NDAA compliant. Software, there's overwhelming different software packages out there. There's really two categories, right? There's ground control software and there's data processing software. Ground control software is what you actually use to control the drone, right? Some software allows you to do flight planning or data capture settings. Some software lets you automate the drone using waypoints. There's some safety features depending upon the drones you do. But the important thing is not all software is compatible with all drones. So sometimes you get the drone and the software, this is the software we're going to use. Other times you can get drones and you can pick and choose your software. Data processing is for, I captured 80 gigs of photos and now I want to stitch them all together and make an orthomosaic or a digital surface model, or you collect LiDAR, right? And you want to process that. There's a big thing right now. There's desktop software and there's cloud-based software. Desktop software, your 80 gigs of photos are stored on your personal computer. Cloud-based, they're stored in the cloud. Cloud-based software is nice, but it's also kind of expensive, right? So, but there's a big thing with this right now. And then there's also package software where they do ground control and data processing. And then you'll see things where it's very sensor-specific software, like our hyperspectral, right? We're using custom software. Pix4D is a standard in photogrammetry. Many people in this room might have heard of it. It's good. Pix4D Mapper is the initial photogrammetry survey. What Matic is a souped up version of Mapper. When they came out with Mapper, it was designed for cameras that were 20 megapixels, not thinking that in 5 or 10 years from now, we're gonna have cameras that are 40, 50, 61 megapixels and so on. So Matic is a very souped up version of Mapper to process higher resolution photos. Esri, we work with Esri a lot, right? We were curious to know what their capabilities are, right? Esri Site Scan is an all-in-one package, right? It does mission planning, it does data processing, it does photos, LiDAR, I think it does multiband even, and it's all cloud-based. Drone Deploy is another all-in-one package that's cloud-based. Agisoft, great photogrammetry software. It's Russian. Right? So it's weird. I was talking to the USGS. There's ways to get around it, right? USGS will still use Agisoft because Agisoft lets you do things and have more settings in like Pix4D, right? So it is really good software, but again, there's a gray area, right? And so then it comes down to terminology and data agreements of you're hiring me to do this or this, and you know, it's not quite clear. I'd like to work with Metashape a little bit more, but really, ultimately, we're using our new pilot to control our big drone. That's open source drone software. Mission planning, we can do all those things listed above, and we're using Pix4D, Matic, and Mapper right now for photogrammetry. Insurance. Oh, didn't think about this until, yeah, we're buying really expensive drone, we're buying really expensive payloads. And what happens if it crashes? Because accidents happen, right? And I went into the world of trying to get estimates of how much this is going to cost us, right? And ultimately, like with driving a car, there's liability insurance and there's collision insurance. You're covered with, if I damage property, it's covered, or if I ruin my drone, it's covered, right? And so there's three main carriers, aviation carriers, Global Aerospace, Chubb, and Star. And then there's a couple brokers that you usually have to go through to get to the carriers. BWI is great for annual policies. Skywatch is really good if you want to do a monthly policy, or they even have on-demand hourly insurance, right? If I want to go do a real estate capture, and I'm only going to fly for the drone for an hour, I can get on my app, I can put in the location, I can pay my $10, and I got $1 million liability coverage so that if I wreck the interior or something, I'm covered, right? So yeah, we have the big drone is insured through the university aviation policy. We're paying about $5,000 a year for specifically that. That's with a 10% deductible. The Mavic, we use Skywatch. We do a monthly liability insurance policy, and then DJI has great collision insurance, right? You can buy these packages through DJI. You crash your drone, you send it back, you pay a little bit of money, and you get a new one, right? So it's all based on how much the cost of the drone was. But it's set up like you can have two types of accidents. You can have the drone falls out of the sky, and I can pick it up and send it back. You also have times where the drone just flies away. You never see it again, right? So it's set up to have, you're allowed 4 replacements, 2 of them being a flyaway, 2 of them being crashed. And for a 5,000 down drone to pay $240 for a new one, it's a pretty good deal. So if you do buy a Chinese DJI drone, consider the DJI Care Refresh. Yeah. The more time you have flying the drones, the more you appease the insurance gods. The more time you have flying on a specific drone that you want to insure a really expensive payload on, the better. The whole idea of getting the drone this summer was to accumulate 100+ flight hours on it. Me and Kyle are flying it. We're trying to say, we know this drone, we've learned this drone. Now we're going to attach an extremely expensive payload to it and fly with it, right? That estimate annual premium with the hyperspectral sensor can get up to $20,000 a year once we're going. And we hopefully bring that price down the more experience we have on it. If you're looking to insure a drone through the university, contact Laura over at Risk Management. She's the one that's kind of leading up the program right now. Right. Real quick, the crew, me and Kyle Summerfield are the ones that have been standing up the program over the past year. We're the ones that have been going out flying the little drone and the big drone on a frequent basis. I am the only one licensed right now with the FAA 107. Kyle and Rachel will be working on this license. We hope to get them certified by this upcoming field season in 2025. Rachel Toner from the Wyoming Geological Survey just started with the Viz Center. She's assisting on GIS remote sensing with me. Cole James is a software modeler developer. At the Viz Center, he's been helping out as a visual observer and then also helping out with some of the data processing. Having a good crew is key. Man, me and Kyle, we're in like military mode when we go out there, right? We're calling out everything that we do. We're setting things up. I'm always letting Kyle know that I'm doing this. Kyle's always letting me know that I'm doing this. We take turns being the visual observer, and we take turns being the one manipulating the controls. You know, when you got planes flying over you kind of in low airspace, like it sends shivers. Like you have to be on top of this. You have to have visual observers scanning the skyline, looking for dangers and obstacles and threats, right? So we've really got into it, but I would never want to fly with somebody like if I had beef with a manager and I didn't like the guy or he was a hothead, like that's the last person you want to go on the field with, right? Because one person's really looking at the controller, trying to keep an eye on the drone. The other visual observers looking at the airspace, trying to keep, right? I mean, it's almost having 3 people would be the most ideal situation, but you can do it with 2, but it's very important. Good communication is key with your team. Also, university wants to know if you are flying drones, right? So there is a UAS policy in place, right, for students and employees. If you're on a field trip, if you're doing research or whatever, they want to know, right? And you got to contact Carrie Hesko in the Research and Economic Development Department. She'll get you an application, you fill out your application, you submit it, and there's basically a committee that will review it and approve. And it's really all about safety. You know, we're stewards of the university when we go out there and fly, and we want to make sure that, you know, we're following all rules. And the university wants to make sure we're following all the rules. So that is something to keep in the back of your head if you're going to fly here. Okay. I think about 5 minutes left. We can talk about hyperspectral real quick, the exciting stuff, right? So for those of you that don't know, hyperspectral imaging is a technology that acquires and analyzes reflected light in the visual near infrared and near infrared regions of the electromagnetic spectrum, right? You can also get into ultraviolet. We are really focusing on that near SWIR region. There's also midwave infrared and long-wave infrared. Those cameras exist, but the technology isn't there yet to put them on a drone. So the beautiful thing is RGB, right? You're using 3 bands, multispectral, you're using tens of discrete bands. And with hyperspectral, you're using hundreds of continuous band, right? So you really have a really big bandwidth and capabilities of really getting really high-end spectral data. So the refined spectral resolution, right, of hyperspectral imaging can provide direct identification and analysis of surface materials. So it doesn't penetrate the ground, but it can see at the ground, right? So areas with sparse vegetation are kind of key, like Wyoming is a great place to do hyperspectral surveys. Many subtle objects and materials can be uncovered and extracted, right, for detection, discrimination, and so on. It's become really popular in the world of geology, right? Because of these capabilities. It's been used for mineral exploration and it's been proven to work, right? The USGS Spectroscopy Lab in Denver has done a lot of work, and we'll get into the spectral algorithm, but tons of work. This is an airborne survey that the USGS did. The hyperspectral was on a manned aircraft, but it's an amazing technology. And again, having that wide wavelength region, right, of going from the near to SWIR, some minerals are diagnostic of certain wavelength regions, right? Iron oxides are found in the visual near infrared region. Carbonates are found in the SWIR region, right? So having that large region gives us more ways and more opportunities to explore. Also, with hyperspectral surveys, you need a ground truth. And this traditionally was with a field spectrometer, right? A little instrument, and you go in the field and you can shoot it at objects and you can get the spectral signature of that object, right? And so when you're doing surveys from satellite data, you want to make sure what the satellites are seeing are on the ground. And this is the tool and instrument that you use to confirm that in ground truth. This reference data that you collect is key to training and supervised classification after you've collected the data. We haven't acquired this instrumentation, but as soon as we're done acquiring the sensor, this will be the next thing that we need to jump into and procure. Working with spectral data, there's all these different spectral algorithms, right? And there's some that have been widely used in all different flavors. It's overwhelming. But the US Geological Survey has this spectral algorithm called tetracorder. It's great. They've measured all the different minerals in Denver. They have spectral signatures of all these minerals. So it's a really good approach for mineral exploration. You can really notice, you can really detect subtle changes in mineralogy, right? Really subtle things. Spectral angle mapper was developed by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in the 1990s. It's good, but it has its limitations. And so really, our applications of hyperspectral mineral exploration. I'm going to start a PhD. We're going to explore to see if we can do it for lithological mapping, right? Most HI studies have been focused on a mineral or a rock, and I want to see if we can train and classify sequences of rocks which become a geologic member or a geologic formation, right? So it could be a new quantitative approach to geologic mapping. We have a lot of coal in Wyoming. We're trying, if we can't burn it, we're trying to find other uses for it. It's important to know the quality of the coal so we can do coal quality characterization. And we can't smell things with hyperspectral, but what's beautiful about the hyperspectral is trying to detect greenhouse emissions is the holy grail of hyperspectral right now. And on satellites and some manned aircraft cameras, they've actually been able to do it. It's not capable yet for the drones, right? But what we can do and what's been done in the past is we're doing, we do carbon capture, transport, and storage. We're putting carbon back into the ground, into these reservoirs. We wanted to monitor if we're seeing greenhouse gases or methane seepage coming out of the ground. So we can do indirect monitoring by monitoring the vegetation to see if there's variations in the vegetation as a result of methane seeping out of the ground. So this has been done. This is something we're going to try to work for. Also, the camera will be used in air and lab. We're gonna fly it in summer, and then we're gonna set it up in the lab during the winter months. And then we're gonna take rock samples, and scan those for minerals and other things. And I believe I finished on time. This is a wonderful, amazing photo from the Flaming Gorge area, capturing this fractured surface. Again, right now we need to go out and get some flight times. But yeah, this was just a cool image that we captured this summer out in the field. And yeah, that's it. I hope this helps. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
So you may want to check with the Berry Biodiversity Center. There is a ASD field spec. They bought it with $65,000.
Yeah, it's expensive.
So there was a faculty member in geography who bought it, and it's been here. So check with them before you buy it.
This is great to know. Absolutely. We'll definitely look into it. Yeah, they're expensive. I mean, and then the ones that we need, you need to get one that works in relationship to the resolution on your camera, right?
It's
so it'll
the
be
same wavelength range. It goes from about 300 nanometers to 2600 nanometers.
Thank you. I will definitely look into that. That's great to know. Yep.
I got a couple, but I guess the one I was most concerned with, I was wondering how the software or maybe not, how does it integrate when you're flying the hyperspectral and the RGB? Do you have to like basically like hit go on the camera and then fly, or are you able to say like, you know, program, take a picture every 15 meters or whatever?
Yes, there's an RGB camera on the actual hyperspectral too, right? So we can actually see RGB and we can see hyperspectral. I haven't figured out, I have to figure out which spectrometer I'm gonna get, and then I can figure out which software I'm gonna get. I haven't quite got to that bridge yet. But yeah, the drone will basically be flying, somebody will be watching it, and then on a laptop, they'll be looking at the hyperspectral imaging that's being collected. So it'll be actually a 3-man operation when we're doing it. Visual observer, drone manipulating controller, and then somebody that's observing the actual sensor collecting the data.
Well, that's neat that it's built in, because on a much smaller scale, I've flown a drone, 3D Arcilla with a near infrared camera, and at that time it was a GoPro. It was slightly offset, 2 cameras, and then, you know, we had to make a model and combine it. And then that was the trick, was, you know, you had an infrared model, and then the RGB, there were 2 different data sets, and hopefully they're taking at the same intervals, and just wondering if
And that's the beauty of these sensors, right? It's all co-aligned, it's all registered. So there's a veneer and a SWIR sensor and a LiDAR puck and an RGB, all looking at the exact same thing and capturing everything at the same time.
like they probably take at the same time.
Yes.
But I think most of them use a prism actually to split the incoming light into those wavelengths. So you really don't have different sensors. So DJI and others, they make those sensors. You literally see 5 of them, each collecting in different regions. But many of the hyperspectral, it's one sensor that's actually collecting the light and splitting it into different regions of the spectrum.
Yeah, I would have to double check. I'm pretty sure that's a veneer sensor and a SWIR sensor that are co-aligned.
The SWIR is completely different. You need a completely different optics. I'm just talking about the near infrared and the visible. They're all like one that they will split. The short wave is a whole different animal. It has to be, that's why they are expensive.
Yep. And yet, when we get the hyperspectral, we're really going to test the school of computing power, right? Because these are going to be extremely large data sets. So again, we're excited to collaborate with school computing and advanced research computing and really push the boundaries of computing power with this hyperspectral payload. So.
Any other questions? Well, this is quite an expensive drone.
Yep.
Which is why I think many universities are beginning to have someone responsible for what they are calling shared instrumentation. Can anyone on campus use this drone, and would it come with a pilot? I mean, can other faculty and students and staff borrow this drone and use it in their project?
Yeah, so right now, right, the VIS Center wants to collaborate, right, with agencies and other departments, right? First thing we need to do is we need to master this, right? We need to master the drone, we need to master the payloads, And that's gonna take another year or two, realistically, because we're flying during summers, winter field season, winter, right? So we have to master it first. Are we open to definitely like, can we be included on grants? Are there projects? Can we collaborate with other agencies? Absolutely, we're totally down to do that. Are we gonna let a student just check out the drone and hyperspectral payload for a day? Probably not. But you know, once it gets ups and goings, once the sensor, the cameras in our lab, I could see students being, you know, giving access to some students to come in and use it for analysis and stuff like that. The insurance thing is the big kicker, right? Me and Kyle are listed on the insurance policy, so like we're the ones that have to fly it, right? So we could see collaboration and work done, but it would probably have to be definitely under our supervision, and we'd have to make sure everybody's happy and on the same page, right?
Yep.
Because again, it's just expensive and there's lots of costs associated to that, so.
And then another question regarding the ban of the DJI drones. Do we know if other countries are also banning American-made drones or banning American-produced software? Do we have that information? Is this kind of a
All the other countries are using Chinese drones. They don't want American drones. They're cheaper and better. I mean, and Russia's using DJI drones in the war right now,
Yeah.
right? US is using Harris drones. I mean, it's a drone war right now, but yeah, I don't think they want to use American drones because they can use DJI drones, and DJI drones are really amazing pieces of technology.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating to see that we can't use them, and it's really interesting to see how things are going to pan out if this ban happens or not. I think it's only a matter of time. There's a lot of, again, push corporate America. It's only a matter of time before they really try to squeeze DJI out of the American markets. But they're amazing. I just bought a DJI drone. It's the Neo. It's about this big. It's tiny. It lands in your hand. I can talk to it. It follows me around. I sit in my room and home and fly it around. They're amazing drones. So I don't mean to poop on DJI because it's amazing, but we're forced to go compliancy.
On a different note, you know, when you develop a rental policy for other units, sometimes you may get requests only for the sensor. They may say, hey, we have a different drone. Can we take your sensor, put it in ours? So you may want to consider rental policy for not just the drone. What if somebody comes and asks you, can I just take the hyperspectral sensor?
Yeah, that'll be tricky though. Like to take the hyperspectral and put it on a tripod and go into the field is one thing. There's a lot of integration that goes in with the hyperspectral, right? I have to get the sensor integrated, and there's a big debate if this is going to Norway or if this is going to Florida, right? Because the Norway, well, if we do high specs, otherwise, if it's head wall, it'll all be done in the United States. But yeah, there's a lot of integration. We will be able to detach it. It won't be on a gimbal. It'll be hard mounted. If we had a gimbal, it would be ideal, but we're over the weight capacity. So yeah, we'll see about checking it out, renting it, and all that stuff. Again, I could see lab use is not going to be a problem. I can see there's going to be some hoops to jump through with just lending it out. But yeah.
What do you have mounted on it right now? It looks like there's a camera, and then is that the spectral unit below it?
Yep, so the hyperspectral, we haven't gotten it yet. This is just the high resolution Sony RGB camera, 61 megapixel. So that's what we're going out and flying to create orthomosaics. The actual controller is the ground control station, which is underneath it.
So it looks like there's a smaller camera up top. Is that something?
There is. This just came with the drone. It's a little GoPro, right? The idea of this is that if I don't have a camera down here, if there's videos of this drone, just pick it up like big heavy cargo nets and transporting it for shore, offshore onto a barge, right? And so if you're hauling something that doesn't have a camera, the drone has this little GoPro camera so you can at least see what you're doing. We don't use it because we always have a payload that has a camera. So it's just this little extra thing that came on the drone that we don't really utilize. Yep.
I was just gonna ask if it's if an RGB camera is different than like a regular camera. Like
Nope, same thing,
Okay.
same technology, 3 bands. Yep, red, green, and blue, and then you blend those colors together and you get to see the rainbow.
So Chris Leatherman is online. He just said that if your colleagues need 107 stuff, feel free to reach out to him. He's willing to help out.
Chris Leatherman, great instructor. Some of my favorite classes I've taken through the YGIS program and his classes. Yeah, he's a great contact. Again, if you need to take the exam, take this 1 credit course. It will prepare you. Makes it a lot easier.
Nick?
Oh, yeah, I got a bunch, but I know we're out of time, but I was wondering first, would you guys take volunteers to come with you to do, would you guys take this out just to be that third person potentially?
Yeah, absolutely. We always have people that are interested in coming out and seeing it. Man, we've been so overwhelmed with everything. We had spent a lot of time out in Southwest Wyoming flying it. We're getting back to normal, and so we're gonna try to go out to like the Happy Jack area in the next month or two and try to get in some more flights, start testing our base station and stuff. So if anybody in this room is interested, just please shoot me an email. I'll be more than happy to put you on a list and keep you in the loop. And we have a couple people from SCR too that just want to come out and see it in operation, everything like that. So yeah.
We got time for one more, and then real quick, we kind of have an ongoing debate with Shannon, and I'm sure he's still on there. It's not a secret, but we have the drones that are underneath the FAA guidelines.
Yep. Under 0.55 pounds.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, I don't need it's fine, I'll just fine, use it for whatever. I'm like, I still think if it's for research, it still qualifies as a drone, even though it's under 0.5
So you don't have to register your drone. If it's over 0.55, you need to register it, right? Kyle Summerfield just bought the DJI Mavic Mini. It's under 0.55 pounds. He didn't need to register it. The other thing with the drones that are under 0.55 pounds is they aren't required to broadcast remote ID, right? So my DJ Neo, I don't need to register it. I don't need to worry about remote ID. When I fly it, I'm flying in recreation.
Sure.
If you're using a Mavic Mini that's under 0.55 pounds and you're using it for commercial purposes,
well, right, but then like for research.
107 would still, if you're using it for commercial purposes,
least that's my
the 107
understanding.
would, yeah. And you would still want to register it. I don't know though. I would have to check to see if the Mavic Minis that Kyle bought actually has remote ID on it or not. I don't know if they do.
It's just because specifically it's for like research purposes and those. And it's like
You
kind
keep
of
saying commercial purposes.
Yeah.
Does educational research?
Yeah,
fall
so
under that?
there's also way back in the day before all these certifications, the university got this certificate of authorization that any researcher could use to fly research purposes without having their 107. I think that's slowly been phased out because of the 107, and now they expect you to have your 107. You're gonna have to get approval from the UAS committee. The UAS committee is gonna want you to have somebody that's flying to have a 107.
Yeah, that was my next question. It's like, well, do we have to still get it approved then, even though you're not to get it registered, don't broadcast?
Well, they want to know, I mean, again, even like if Kyle went on a school field trip and it was Kyle's drone, but he was on a school field trip and he was flying it, I would still think that Gary Heskell would want to know. They want to know, right? Doesn't mean that they're always going to find out, right? I'm sure there's plenty of situations where you go out and put it up quick and it is what it is. But yeah, I would think that they would say anything that's school related, they want to know and they want to make sure everything's official and you're certified and all that stuff.
I think it is, yes, it is something, because when we do the flight school, some students will say, bring my own drone and fly with Chris, or somebody. That was the answer. Doesn't matter what drone you have, if you are flying within UW, or if you are part of a UW, you have to have the permission from them. So whatever they tell, you have to follow.
On the application, it asks, is this a university drone or is this a personal drone? So you're right. If it's they still want permission, even if it's a contractor. If you pay a contractor to do work for you for the university regarding research, they want to know.
Okay, not much gray area then.
There's not much gray.
Okay.
Okay, I think we are out of time. This was a really good talk, excellent talk. We appreciate it. So
Wonderful.
once again, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
See you next time, guys.
So he doesn't have a pilot's license?
No, you're